you might want to have your attorney present for this one. Welcome to AI in 5, where we discuss key AI developments in 5 minutes or less. Today, we are debating Anthropic versus the U.S. government. The Pentagon recently slapped Anthropic with a supply chain risk label, which, is a pretty severe designation usually reserved for hostile foreign states. And they did this simply because Anthropic refused to let its AI be used for domestic mass surveillance and, well, fully autonomous weapons. To me, Anthropic is entirely justified in defending its First Amendment rights to set these critical boundaries.
Yeah, see, I look at this strictly from the perspective of operational security. I mean, the military simply cannot function if private vendors dictate national security parameters. But the stakes here are massive either way. Anthropic is suing to block this designation, looking at upwards of $200 million in lost Defense Department contracts, not to mention the compounding reputational damage of being labeled a national security threat.
It's wild to think about, right? The government is essentially equating a Silicon Valley startup with a foreign adversary over ethical guardrails.
Right.
The fascinating legal angle here is Anthropic's argument that their code, specifically the safety parameters limiting autonomous targeting, constitutes protected speech. They're arguing the government isn't just rejecting a product, they are unlawfully punishing the expression of those values.
But look at the reality of modern defense infrastructure. If you're commanding a defense unit, how can you rely on a software vendor might suddenly pull the plug on your targeting system based on a corporate moral objection? Take Palantir, for example. They rely heavily on Anthropic software for military applications. If Anthropic unilaterally decides a specific use case violates their terms, they compromise the entire defense chain.
I get the operational headache for contractors like Palantir, but we're talking about deploying AI in weapons without human oversight, or conducting mass surveillance on citizens' digital footprints. Anthropic is pointing out that the technology just isn't ready for autonomous lethal decisions.
Sure, but
Microsoft stepping in with an unprecedented amicus brief is massive. They are deeply entrenched in DoD contracts themselves, yet they recognize the chilling precedent of blacklisting a company for maintaining safety boundaries.
Microsoft's brief is significant, I'll grant you that, but look at how the rest of the market is reacting to the operational reality. OpenAI signed a DoD deal shortly after this fallout. They recognize that the military needs vendors who align with national security objectives, not ones acting as rogue regulators. If the government cannot control how AI is used in its own defense systems, it loses the authority to defend the nation entirely.
OpenAI's deal actually highlights the political nature of this whole situation. OpenAI accepted essentially the same terms regarding private data, yet Anthropic was the one blacklisted. That strongly suggests the supply chain risk label is retaliatory. Plus, top engineers want to work for an organization willing to stand up for its values. We're already seeing elite engineering talent flocking to Anthropic because of this principled stance. Safety simply has to supersede operational convenience.
The critical distinction is in the scope of those red lines. OpenAI focused heavily on private citizen data, whereas Anthropic wanted to restrict the processing of public digital footprints and broad military operations. You can't run a military apparatus if your software vendor is dictating the rules of engagement. When the DoD signs a contract, they require absolute operational certainty, not a debate over use cases in the middle of a combat scenario.
It's a profound tension. We have the pressing need to prevent premature AI deployment in mass surveillance and lethal weapons, balanced against the military's demand for total control of its tools. This clash really represents the first critical wave of AI regulation. It forces us to ask whether private businesses or the government should ultimately dictate the deployment parameters of military AI.
Exactly. The implications for tech companies, government contractors, and everyday consumers are just beginning to surface. There's so much complexity to explore as these technologies evolve and these legal battles play out in the courts.
Well, that's a wrap. Thank you for joining us for this episode of AI in 5 on the Global AI Policy News Channel. Until next time.